There's a surprising, expanding, and somewhat counterintuitive side effect of podcasting. And there's a very good chance you've experienced it, even if you may not realize it. It's something I would have rolled my eyes at you about back in my days at Spotify and Audible and MTV, because there, bigger and broader was almost always better. But with the current boom of niche podcasts, we're seeing a delightful byproduct emerge. Narrowly focused shows are generating life-changing communities, not fan clubs, not people with a sticker on their laptop, but real, legitimate, meaningful communities. I know it sounds a little hyperbolic, but this community stuff around podcasting is really happening, and it's especially remarkable when you consider what's happening with pretty much every other type of media right now. We're not exactly living in a golden age of thoughtful, generous, connected conversation. Scroll through any comment section and I think you'll get what I mean. The human race at large is not showing its best self on most forms of media, which is why it's all the more noteworthy that podcasting is managing to do basically the opposite. Most media is creating fractures and fighting and ugliness. Podcasts are bringing people closer together. Sure, there's the whole attract to your ideal audience angle of this. But these communities are really rising up organically, often without any explicit calls to action. And it's because the podcasters that have a community around them are showing up in a very real and very, double buzzword alert, authentic and vulnerable way. And in showing up as, again, buzzword, their best selves, their realist selves, they invite their audiences to do the same. And they show up similarly raw and open to conversations they aren't able to have elsewhere. These conversations that happen first inside the podcast and then outside and around it eventually bloom into actual real community. And there are plenty of examples of this. Pick your podcast, there's probably a following around it. But the ones that are actually turning into something in real life beyond the walls, if you will, of a podcast, the author of a book called, appropriately, a little on the nose, How to Build a Cult. His name is Jody Rainsford, and his podcast is called Bad Boy Running. And the Bad Boy Running Club has cropped up, and they have events. They've even gotten tattoos with the logo of the podcast. I mean, hey, if you're going to stumble into a tattoo shop and get the lightning bolt and my Sounds Great logo tattooed anywhere, who am I to stop you? And I also just saw on Amy Poehler's Good Hang podcast Instagram that her followers are referred to as Polaroids, which might be my personal favorite name of a podcast following. There's also the titular daddies who hang on Alex Cooper's every word. And then there's my friend Ali Prato and her podcast Infertile AF, which she launched as a result of experiencing her own fertility struggles and needing a place to learn more about this experience and be in conversation with other people experiencing the same types of struggles. And she went looking for this community and it didn't exist. She was not alone in the experience, but there was no central place where people could learn from each other and experts and feel solidarity with others who were going through that struggle. The Infertile AF podcast filled a real need for an audience that didn't even know it was an audience, but it had a hunger for real conversation around something they were experiencing in very real ways in their very real lives, which led to real life connections and real life gatherings put on by Ali and the people who flocked to her show because it talked about something that was so rarely talked about elsewhere. I talk a lot about the ROI of podcasting, which I know is probably the most flavorless way to describe how a podcast can give back what you put into it. But the most overlooked and most meaningful of all podcast ROI has got to be community. And there's no one better to speak about it than today's guest, host of the Infertile AF podcast, and my friend, Ali Prato. We don't talk much about business, so I'm excited to actually hear about your podcasts and what part it plays in your business and how you decided to start one, how and why.
It's so good to talk to you.
Yes, you too.
I'll give you a little bit of context. It was going through an infertility struggle, a secondary infertility struggle. I had what's called recurrent pregnancy loss. I had 4 miscarriages. I was going through a really dark time emotionally because Anybody who's gone through any sort of infertility struggles knows that when you want to have a baby and you can't, it's really sad and it's really hard. My son was born through IVF, so we did have the second child, but it was through in vitro fertilization. I finally was able to kind of start writing about it and talking about it, and this is all leading up to the podcast. So originally I had thought, I'm going to write a memoir, because when I was going through this, I couldn't find any books. I went to the bookstore looking for books on miscarriage, and there really was nothing there. There was like a 2-inch wide section at Barnes and Noble, and I was like, why is no one talking about this? Because my way of connecting to people and getting through hard shit is through community. And I couldn't find community in the infertility space. So I set out to write a book about it. And I was told infertility books don't sell. So nobody was interested in buying the book. So I pivoted to starting a podcast, because a friend of mine who had a very successful, and still does, podcast in the lifestyle space and like the coaching space, she was like, screw the book, just do a podcast. So I've decided to move from the book to the podcast. And first episode of the show was me telling my story, because I felt like if I'm going to expect people to talk about their fertility struggles, I have to go first, and I have to lead the way by being raw and real and not cute and talking about all the hard stuff. So I launched it almost 7 years ago to date.
That's incredible.
Thank you. I launched it in 2019. And like I said, the first episode was me. And then this week we are on our 369th episode. So it's come out once a week, every single week since launch. And it's kind of become the backbone of my new career path, which is in the fertility space.
You are such goals. You represent the upper percentile that you're in just for continuing to do it this long. I think I've shared this stat with you before, but 90% of people don't make it past episode 9. You're really beating the odds. And the fact that you've been able to keep up a weekly cadence, this is only, who knows when this episode will come out, but at the point that we're recording this, I've released 3 episodes and I am ready to throw in the towel. The whole thing is meant to be an experiment for myself to see if I can practice what I preach and if I can sustain a podcast, especially I'm interested in women's podcasts and keeping women in it, because women succumb to pod fade all the time and they get shouted down by the Mo Mogans of the world. So just kudos to you. This was born out of something that you needed. And I myself kind of did this too. And clients and people in my accelerator community will say, I went to find a podcast or something on this, and there was nothing. So talk to me about how you did this, not just for yourself, but for other people you knew needed this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So like I said, looking for books, looking for even Facebook groups at the time, and they were all like weird and just not my jam. So I set out to create something that I wish I had when I was in the thick of it. So the whole concept of the show, again, it's called is, talking about people's fertility struggles. So it's talking to regular people that have gone through infertility journeys, talking to celebrities, but also talking to experts and docs. And then it's branched off as well into people who are building their families through assisted reproductive technology. So like LGBTQ plus people, trans people, solo parents by choice, people who've had surrogacy journeys, donor conception, etc. The whole MO of the show is to make it as diverse as possible and to tell as many diverse stories as possible, because I want people everywhere to find somebody that they can connect to. Because as you know, and I feel like we've talked about this before, people just want to be seen and people want to be heard and represented. And so that's my goal, is to just include as many different stories as I can. And even like almost 400 episodes into it, I'm still getting stories where I'm like, wow, I've never heard that before. There's so many different ways that family building can go, and so many challenges and also so many successes. It's just been a very interesting ride to talk to so many people who have gone through some sort of family building struggles.
Talk to me about starting out and how you were able to get the word out and to get it to people who needed to hear it, and maybe then engage them and make them feel like they were part of a community.
I think part of the key was not overthinking it, because I feel like if I would have done like a proper like risk assessment or like what could go wrong if I launched this, I might have psyched myself out. So My friend Kara that I was talking about earlier that encouraged me to start the podcast was just like, just do it. Just put it out there and see what happens. So it was kind of like, I still had a full-time job at the time when I launched it. And I was like, all right, this is just going to be my little side hustle. I wasn't making any money on it. You know, it was totally, and I thought, well, I'll put my story. And then I found some other people to interview, friends of mine, friends of friends. And it just kind of got the ball rolling. I think that part of the way that it did end up getting to people was through Instagram. That's a huge part of my business. People were coming to Instagram to find others in what's called the TTC community, which is like the trying to conceive community, and searching by hashtags for infertility podcasts or TTC community or TTC support. And that's how people discovered my show. And then it morphed into a community called Fertility Rally. And we can talk about more
I'd love
about
to
that
hear
if
it.
you
Yeah.
want. Yeah. So a woman that was on my podcast named Blair, she was on the 8th episode, and she actually emailed me through Instagram, was like, I've been listening to your show. I know it's early, but I'd love to tell my journey. She was going through infertility struggles of her own. So she and I became friends totally through social media. And then we decided that we list up kind of like a summit, but we didn't want to use that word. So we came up with the name Fertility Rally because we thought that sounded more hopeful and more fun, for lack of a better term. So we started planning this event, and we had a venue in Brooklyn. It was going to be awesome. We started lining up speakers, and then COVID hit. So we had to get our deposit back and, you know, cancel the IRL event, but we ended up pivoting to an online event, and we called it Fertility Rally Live, and we ended up selling tickets. And then in tandem with that, we started this membership community because we'd also started hosting like Zoom support groups during COVID for people that were in the fertility world. And they were free at first, but we started getting like 50, 60 people per call. And we're like, is this a thing? Is this like a membership community that we should kind of make more organized and start to offer more things? So that's how Fertility Rally started in 2020. And since then, we've had about 5,000 people come through the rally doors, you know, come for our support groups and our events and all the things. It's the place I wish I had when I was going through it, because I didn't have a weekly support group that I could go to and talk to women about all the shit I was going through. Because we always say it's the worst club with the best members. Nobody wants to be in the club, but are so willing to help each other out and share resources and information and just be there for each other. Because it's hard to relate to people in the fertility world. You're going through it. It's hard to relate to people that aren't going through it. And there's just an instant bond with people that are.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. It truly is. And I know so many people are so grateful for you, and you're like a celebrity in the fertility.
No.
You are. So let's talk about the is this a thing moment, and where you realize when it becomes a thing and you want it to have more structure, that costs money. But also, if you want to dedicate your life to it, it becomes time is money. I'm getting to the whole capitalist portion of it, which is a fact, right? So when did you start figuring out that it could become a monetization tool for you as well?
So the podcast at first, like I said, was just, it is still totally free. Anybody can, as most podcasts are. But I did start probably about 6 months in contacting brands and clinics and people in the fertility space to see if anybody wanted to become a sponsor or a partner, because I was getting a lot of downloads and word was spreading, and there was articles. There was an article in People magazine about the podcast, and I was getting some press. So it was like the ball was rolling and it was becoming successful. So my first ad, Courtney, was for $5. And it was this woman who started this company called Uva. Maybe it was $25, but it was very minimal. And now, thankfully, I'm doing brand deals that span the whole year that are not just podcast ads, but they're like social posts, their newsletters, their events, there's all these different facets to it. So again, it just kind of started out really small and has grown very organically. And now this is, you know, the bread and butter of what I do. I still freelance and do some journalism on the side, but the podcast, the Fertility Rally, and then these children's books that I started writing all with under the Infertile AF group umbrella are kind of the main money makers for me now.
You're reminding me, Amy Nelson at the gathering that we both went to talked about the multi-hyphenate.
Yeah.
You're like the multi-hyphenate icon. I do want to talk about the book thing too. But for people who are just starting out, I find it fascinating that what I heard was that you went and took matters in your own hands. You're like, somebody wants to sponsor this. And you yourself picked up the phone or email or whatever and did this.
Yeah, 100%.
Can you say more? Because you feel like you have to like do it through a business that sells sponsorships or that there's some formal way.
Right. Well, I will say that I was doing it on my own at first, and I still am to a certain degree. So there's kind of two different partnerships that I do. About a year into the podcast, I was contacted by this platform called Red Circle, and they wanted to bring me on, and I'm actually still on their platform. I left for a minute, but I'm back because they can get advertisements for you, and they can also do programmatic ads. So they can do like brand deals and programmatic. So I have that as one kind of arm of it, but to be totally honest, that's not that much money. Like it's just, they take a cut, to be totally transparent. And also it's just not big enough deals. So I made an agreement with them that if I was going to join their platform, that I would still be able to do this other partnership stuff on my own. So that's more of the big partnership deals that are tens of thousands. And it's host-read ads. So Red Circle will do programmatic ads, or I'll have a limited time campaign with a brand. For example, right now I'm doing one through Red Circle with BetterHelp, who's a big podcast advertiser, as I'm sure you know. They're on like every podcast.
God bless them. They're keeping the industry alive.
No, they're awesome. I love BetterHelp. I love you. Let's keep working together. So we do like a limited time campaign. So we're doing like a March campaign right now. And as soon as I hit whatever number of downloads they wanted, it comes out of the show. The host-read stuff that I do with other brands and clinics, it's baked into the episode and it lives forever in my episodes. So those are the two different ways that we do the advertising.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. I was at a conference last week and there were some big podcasters there, and they were like, it's a long game. So whenever somebody comes to me and is wanting to work with me on podcast strategy, I ask what their goals are. And if it's, I'm going to get rich, I'm going to be a YouTube creator, influencer, I like to be very honest and realistic in managing their expectations, because in a lot of ways, you have beat the odds. I just want to manage the expectations of people listening to this going, oh, I'm going to be like Allie overnight, because it takes a lot of time, right? To make it a meaningful revenue to support you and your family. What would you say to people who are feeling like, I can't do it? Is there a magic number of episodes? I know there are magic numbers of downloads, but maybe they're not always set in stone. What would you say is keep going until?
Gosh, I don't know if there is a magic number. I would say though, and to be honest, I'm not in a super duper comfortable enough place yet, even still 7 years in. I would love to be even more successful and be doing more and bigger deals. It's a hustle. It really is. And there have been times when I'm like, what am I doing? I need to get a full-time job. This is too hard. The paychecks are inconsistent, or I'll get like a big chunk and then nothing for a month. If we didn't have my husband's full-time income and insurance, we wouldn't be able to do this full-time. So I feel very lucky that I do get to do, this, but it's not for the faint of heart, I would say. And I don't know if there's a magic number or number of episodes. I think it's more of you just have to keep your foot on the gas. Like, even this week, I'm like, I have to pitch 25 people this week on X, Y, and Z, or else I'm not going to hit my numbers, things like that. So it's not comfortable. It's hard. But on the flip side, like, I'm so grateful that I'm getting to do something that I really do feel passionate about, that I really do enjoy, that I love, and I have flexibility. You've got 2 kids. I've got 2 kids. I get to go to my kids' games. I get to drive them from school. I'm not working for somebody else. So that's the give and take of it. I think that working in corporate for 20 plus years had pros and cons as well, but
mostly cons in my
it didn't have the flexibility. And that's part of the reason I left my last corporate job, was just like, fuck this. Like, I'm working so many hours. I'm missing out on stuff with my family. And you reach a point, I think, in your career, maybe as you get older. I think it was like when I turned 40, where I was like, I don't want to be writing about cardigan sweaters and belts for Saks Fifth Avenue. I need to do something that's like contributing or putting some good into the world.
Yeah.
And it does feel good to be doing something that I do know is helping people, that it's, again, something I wish I would have had. And it brings up that question, what is success? Is it monetary, or is it being, wow, at least I tried to make a change,
And you're not selling your soul. You're not selling handbags. We all love a good handbag, but you're selling hope and community and solidarity. So yes, you can't put a dollar sign on that. I also want to talk about just your overall brand also includes, we've got the podcast, you've got the community, the books. I have so many people come to me, entrepreneurs, people running their own business, thought leaders, and say, should I do a book first or the podcast? Yours started with, I want to do a book. Wait, that's not going to work. Let me try the podcast. Now you're doing a different flavor of book. But talk to me about the tension of the book versus podcast thing.
So the books, I have a book series out called Work of Art. So it's ART, Play on Assisted Reproductive Technology. And it basically came as just a creative outlet where the original book that I was talking to you about, I wanted to do more of a memoir and that kind of a help book. This is a children's book. It's an illustrated book. And the title came to me first and was like Work of Art. And I'm like, oh, that's a really cute title to talk about fertility stuff. And so I had the title and I sat on it for a while. And then one day I was like, I got to write this book. And I decided to write it about a true experience that I had, which was my son hearing me talk about how he was an IVF baby. And he was like, what's IVF? And so the whole book, the first story is me explaining to him how he was created in a lab, basically. And then I wrote a second book called Beautiful Bird, which is about another friend of mine, another true story, true family, about donor conception and same-sex couples and another beautiful way to build your family. And then I did a board book called You Are a Work of Art, which includes all of the different ways that you can create families. And that book has been cool because clinics and doctors are purchasing that in bulk to give to their patients as graduation gifts from the clinic. So that's been a really fun project. And I'm about to start the fourth book, which I can tell you now because we're about to announce it. It's with Elizabeth Carr, who is the first IVF baby in the US.
Oh my God.
And she and I are friends and we're working on this together and I'm going to tell her story. And we have a really cute title, which I can't say yet, but it's going to be awesome. So that will be the fourth Work of Art book will be about Elizabeth Carr and how her parents were pioneers and her doctors were pioneers. So I'm super excited about that.
Do you feel like the books would have happened without the podcast?
No, I don't think so because I talk about them on the show. I do a little plug and try to make it very organic. It's not super salesy, but I think I needed to establish this platform and the respect of people in my industry before coming out with just some random book about a random family. It's like people know me and the fertility rally people all bought the book and were interested in the story. So I think the other things had to come first for me to write the book.
So cool. Let's talk more about the book, like as the traditional model of getting your advance, which I feel like those days are over. So the podcast is a springboard to the books, which are a springboard to the clinics. Yes, you're telling a story, it's a service and a mission. Now it does have a business line to it too, right? Because you're working with clinics. But that's that hustle. You had that idea, right?
It started with just doctors that had been on the podcast that I created these relationships with. Just being consistent with the episodes and with all the fertility rally events and things. And I think there's something to be said for showing up consistently because people really start to respect you more. And not that I'm some big like authority figure, but I do think that my voice is pretty well known within my community. And that helps when you're trying to branch off into other areas. Like when I call a doctor or email them, they're not like, who's this person? They're like, oh, it's Allie. I know her, you know. So building these relationships for the past 7 years through the podcast and through the rally has helped me have like warm intros to people and to not just be coming out of the blue. And then I have people coming to me too. Like I just had a doctor be like, hey, can we get the waiting room bundle? So it's all 3 books so far that they like put in their waiting room for people to read while they're waiting to see the doctor. So that's been cool to kind of have it go both ways.
And you know, you spoke to and under talked about a benefit of podcasting, which is the conversation itself, like what we're having right now. I know more about what you do, even though I know you. I now know, oh, if I know someone who's going through infertility or is opening a clinic and your book could be great, you know? So talk to me about how you nurture those relationships, if it is with any intention, or if it's just it works because you've had this conversation on the podcast. What happens after you've had the conversation?
I think a big part of just my personality in general is I'm very big on supporting other people and what they do, not only in my space, but just like in life. And you're one of these people too, Courtney. You lift up other people, like the more the merrier. If you're successful, I'm successful. I've never thought of other people in the fertility space as competition, even people that have written children's books in the space. I'll promote your book, you promote my book. There's room for all of us. Somebody might have the same idea, but they're not you. So it's never going to be the same execution. So I'm never concerned about that. Point being that I think that the relationships that you asked about, I'm always reposting doctors' videos, or if a clinic puts out some good information, it's just shouting out other people because, again, like the goal is to just people know that I genuinely do support other doctors and clinics and creators and authors and speakers. So I think that that has helped, almost like a boomerang thing, where then they will feel comfortable supporting me. And it's not like I do it because I want them to support me back, but I do genuinely feel like a rising tide lifts all ships, or whatever that saying is.
Yes, that's it.
And especially as women, we need to support each other and amplify each other's work, because word of mouth means everything, not only in fertility, but just in business in general.
Yeah. And what I take away from that, and I'm learning from you too, is that I feel the same way about podcasting generally. You're lifting up the community. It's not like lifting up the business or a particular person. This is something I deeply care about. I love podcasting. I want women to take part in it more. I want it generally to succeed. And so, yes, I will promote other podcasters just out of love for the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that. So the takeaway is, when you're making a podcast, for me at least, and others, find something you really love. And that the whole saying, which is not true, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. It's work, but it will be less painful. It will be more of a second nature kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to go into the rapid fire round. First category is reality checks, podcasting reality checks. What is one thing podcasters overthink?
Overthinking what could go wrong. Instead, think what could go right? Like, what if it goes right? I think we psych ourselves out when we start to think about all the ways it could fail.
What is something podcasters who are thinking about throwing in the towel should look to before making that decision?
I turn to yourself first and say, do I still love this? Do I still have a passion for it? Why am I doing this? What's your why? And if there's still a solid answer there, then I think it's worth it to continue on. But also, I do think there's something to be said for something that's run its course. Infertile AF is probably not going to be going on forever. Does someone want to hear me in 10 years still talking about fertility? They're going to be like, you're a grandma. Like, why am I listening to you? I think that it's okay to close the chapter too when something is complete, but you'll know it as the host or the creator of your own thing. You'll know when it's done.
Yep. And you can pivot. I have recently shown people when they're making a decision about their title or their art, if you scroll down deep in people's feeds, they used to be called something else. They used to even cover something else. They used to have a different art. So this is not permanent. We're going to do some fill in the blanks. AI in podcasting is...
I use it all the time, and I'm not scared or like ashamed to admit that, because I think it's very useful and can save you a lot of time. I use it to help me write podcast descriptions. I don't take it and cut and paste it, but it's a good starting point. I use it sometimes if I'm interviewing an expert to help me come up with questions, just to, again, kind of as like a starting point. So you're not looking at that blank page. I think AI is not going anywhere, and I think we all need to embrace it and use it in a way that we're not doing no work of our own, but you can use it to help you.
I appreciate that. And it's honest, especially as people who are running every aspect of our business. We need someone to kind of bounce ideas off of something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my final question for you, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's new in podcasting, what would it be?
Make sure you get a good editor. I have the best editor. I'm so lucky. He's been with me since episode 1. His name is Ryan, and he's amazing. and I'm so grateful for him. But he only does all the cobbling together my ads and my music and my intro and my outro and my actual episode. He goes through and he makes it sound as good as he possibly can. He takes out all the ums and the awkward pauses, and he's a perfectionist. A key to one of the successes is just having it never be longer than it needs to be.
I hear you, and I'm with you, and I might need his number. But I'll just say thank you.
Don't you dare steal him from me, because I need him for the next show too.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's true. Those every second counts. It really does. Like they say in The Bear, attention spans, they will wander. So God bless the good editors. And I also appreciate you mentioning it's sort of the unseen labor. Everybody probably thinks Allie does it all. Allie's doing everything, but you do have some help, and it's important to shout that out.
Yeah. He helps me, and I can't do any of the tech stuff. It would take me 10 times as long. You know, I pay him a set rate per episode. Sometimes it's really laborious for him. Sometimes it's easy because they're shorter and there's not as many vocal tics and things like that. But yeah, I couldn't do this without him.
And we are coming up on time. Thank you so much, Allie Prato. I bet you'll be hearing from people from this episode who are inspired by this and want to emulate this very mission-driven podcast adventure you've been on. So say where people could find you or listen to you or get more of you.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so glad you're doing this. And it was great to talk to you. But if people want to ask me questions or be on the show or ask me about books or whatever, they can go to my website, which is infertileafgroup.com. You can find my contact info there. You can find all the book info there. You can fill out a quick form if you want to get in touch with me that way. So I'm happy to help anybody out. Please, again, I want to lift other people up, so feel free to reach out.
He's not lying, guys. Allie Prato's good to have in your corner. Thank you for being with us, Allie. Adore you.
Thanks, Court.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Something Allie shared that really hit home. She said that her way of getting through hard things has always been through community. And what she built with her podcast started as a place to share her story in hopes of reaching people who had been through something similar. And then it became a place for people to find each other and talk with each other about this shared experience that they didn't really have a place to put those conversations until they found her podcast. I think that's the real takeaway here. Podcasting is a connection engine. We think of it as a content engine, but to go back to what I said at the beginning of this episode, the side effect is actually the content. The main purpose, especially in the case of niche podcasts like Allie's, is that it built a community, that it brought together people with a shared experience, a shared interest, a shared need for hearing more expertise and more perspectives on a thing that was very central to their lives. Having these podcasts that are centered on real lived experiences and real talk with people who have a lot of real knowledge about it is a way to build trust at scale and intimacy at scale. And it's the kind we used to create in the pre-smartphone era by, I don't know, just randomly showing up at the same park that our friends were at or something. I don't know. I'm constantly perplexed by how we did it back then. But I digress as always. What a podcast is at its best is a relational ladder. It starts with the host having a conversation or, as I am right now, sharing a point of view. And that resonates with an audience. And they then use word of mouth to share it with other people who may say to them, oh, I went through this thing, or I'm looking for more information on this thing. And that person says, oh, hey, I have a podcast for you. You know, it's happened to you. It's happened to me. Of course, the connections that build around podcasts compound on themselves to create opportunities that, are simultaneously beneficial to your bottom line. You can't ignore that. And to the people who are experiencing a real need for solidarity and a place to talk about this lived experience, the good, the bad, the ugly. In other words, they need that community. But let's be clear, it doesn't happen overnight. It's something I know I've said. Podcasting is a long game, but it's such a rewarding game in the end. Allie's 7 years in, nearly 400 episodes deep, and still very candid that it does involve a certain amount of hustle and showing up even when you maybe don't want to. And it's not always predictable, but what she has built has served a real need for a real group of people, and it's something she's building on in pivots that are a natural offshoot from where she started. Point is, if you're thinking about starting a podcast or if you're in it right now and you're wondering if it's worth continuing, I offer this reframing. When you create a podcast, you're not just creating a series of episodes. you're creating a space that can become something of a second home for the people that you serve. If you're looking at your download numbers, or frankly any rather arbitrary, straight numbers-based metric, and wondering if enough people are flocking to your show, please pause and consider instead asking yourself, is it bringing the right people together around something, a shared experience, a shared need? If the answer to that is yes, guess what? You're building a community. And it feels only natural to share here that, no surprise, I'm a big believer in the power of community, of co-creating, of learning in public, sharing knowledge. So if you're thinking, okay, I think I want to do this podcast thing, or I want to keep doing this podcast thing, but it's kind of a slog to do it alone, that, my friend, is exactly why I built my podcast accelerator. It's a space for thoughtful, intentional creators who want to build something sustainable and strategic, expert-informed, and bolstered by community. The connections I've seen come out of the Podcast Accelerator could and maybe have brought tears to my eyes. So if you want to hear more about that, or just want to talk the talk about your podcast ideas and quandaries and concerns, find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM. We can see about getting you on the wait list for the Podcast Accelerator, or maybe I can support your podcast streams another way. But seriously, find me on LinkedIn, Courtney Reimer, Reimer. Send me a connection, send me a note. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, this is Talking the Talk, a podcast about podcasting with me, Courtney Reimer. Thanks for listening. Thanks for making community. Please keep on doing both.